Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on the health harms of hydrogen blending. My name is Zach Williams, and I am the health educator and campaign coordinator for the Environment and Health Program with Physicians for Social Responsibility National. I'd like to thank you all, and especially Oregon PSR, for joining today's presentation and for Oregon PSR for co-hosting, and for your attention over the next 45 to 60 minutes. Just some logistics before we begin. I will have a section at the end of this for Q&A, so any questions that come up, please feel free to drop them into the chat box as they come up. I probably won't be able to get to them as the presentation is going, but we will answer all questions at the end. And if we run out of time for your questions during the Q&A session, please feel free to email me at zwilliams@psr.org. It is up there on the screen right now, and also I just dropped it in the chat box as well. If you have not already, please mute yourself on Zoom to reduce the risk of interruptions, and we'll get going. Alrighty, so first, who is Physicians for Social Responsibility? I'd just like to introduce the organization. Physicians for Social Responsibility is a national nonprofit founded by physicians with over 30,000 members, and it was founded with the mission to protect us from the greatest threats to health and survival. Today, PSR mobilizes physicians and health professionals to advocate for a livable climate and a nuclear weapons-free world. We contribute the critically important health voice to energy, environmental health, and nuclear weapons policy at the local, federal, and international levels. This is an outline of what to expect today. I want to give you some context before we jump right into it. So we will begin the session with quite a bit of context building. Hydrogen production and use is an incredibly nuanced issue, and it's important to start with an understanding of what we're talking about before we get to the nitty-gritty topic of hydrogen blending. Next, we will move to the main portion of today's presentation, which is content about hydrogen blending and the harms to health, climate, and our wallets that come with hydrogen blending. And of course, we will finish today's presentation with solutions because we never present a problem without a solution. You're about to have a lot of information thrown at you, but I have full confidence that everything will make sense and each point will feel connected to the next by the end of this session. So to start us off, I kind of hate webinars that are just a person talking at you for 60 minutes. So I have a moment of audience participation for anyone brave enough. So here's a question for the group. Who here has a gas stove or a gas furnace? And what is natural gas and where does it come from? So please feel free to unmute yourself, throw your answer in the chat. That is any answer that you're comfortable with is fine, but that's an open question for the group, for the 20 of us here. Who here has a gas stove and a furnace? And what is natural gas and where does it come from? Melanie, great to see that you're all electric. And Catherine, yes, you will get the slides after this, absolutely. No gas, no meter. And fracking. Absolutely. So to continue along here, it looks great. I'm a reluctant gas furnace user. Don't you worry, I am a reluctant gas stove user. I rent here in New York City, and I'm the one who teaches about natural gas health harms and all of that. Gas furnace, and I'm in the process of replacing it with a heat pump. Amazing. That's what we love to hear. Natural gas is primarily methane, absolutely. And just as another comment said before, we extract it from the earth through fracking. So yes, that is where our natural gas comes from. It seems like we have a combination of gas appliances and electric appliances here, which is great because the main point of this is talking about hydrogen blended into our natural gas system for use inside of the home. So great, we have a good understanding and a good basis for where we're jumping to. So let's start off with chatting about hydrogen in general. So hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. It is the simplest atom with one proton, one neutron, and a single electron. It is most often found as a diatomic molecule, H2 here. And we can see here on the left what I mean by a diatomic molecule. While hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, H2 gas is not readily available on Earth. The majority of hydrogen atoms on this planet are trapped in water, which is H2O, and hydrocarbons like fossil fuels. The most common process to turn hydrogen into a gaseous form we can use involves burning fossil fuels for energy to extract hydrogen from yet even more fossil fuels. Hydrogen gas is primarily currently used in industry for processes like aluminum, steel, and fertilizer production. Now, there are a couple different ways to produce hydrogen gas, and the distinctions between each are important. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the colorful world of hydrogen production. First and foremost, let's talk about gray hydrogen. Gray hydrogen is a fossil hydrogen, which means it is derived from a fossil fuel. Gray hydrogen is made from methane gas through a process called steam methane reformation, or SMR. Gray hydrogen currently makes up about 99% of hydrogen production in the United States. The greenhouse gas emissions associated with the production of gray hydrogen are from the methane leaks across the supply chain and the emissions emitted during the SMR process. Similar to gray hydrogen, brown hydrogen is derived from coal, so it is yet another fossil hydrogen. Both gray and brown hydrogen maintain our reliance on fossil fuels because both of them derive hydrogen from fossil fuels. Next is blue hydrogen. First and foremost, despite what you may have heard and what may be funded in the Inflation Reduction Act, this is not a source of clean energy. Blue hydrogen is gray or brown hydrogen that is coupled with carbon capture and storage, or CCS. CCS captures carbon dioxide before it makes its way into the upper atmosphere, processes it, transports it, and stores it, typically underground. However, blue hydrogen is still considered a fossil hydrogen since it is still derived from fossil fuels, and all emissions from each part of the supply chain, extraction, transport, processing, are not captured and stored. Furthermore, CCS is far from a perfect technology. CO2 capture rates vary widely, typically around 56%, and there's uncertainty about whether or not CO2 can be stored long-term without leakage, which would defeat the whole purpose of capturing and storing it in the first place. This is a direct quote from one of the authors of one of the studies we use as a reference here to find all these stats about blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is best viewed as a distraction, something that may delay needed action to truly decarbonize the global energy economy. Now, this is particularly important, end quote. This is particularly important for the construction of hydrogen hubs, which may try to pass off blue hydrogen as a clean form of energy. It is certainly not. Gray, brown, and blue hydrogen all maintain our reliance on fossil fuels and are not pathways to a decarbonized future. Now, let's talk about green hydrogen. Green hydrogen uses a process called electrolysis to convert water into hydrogen gas and oxygen. The energy from this process is generated by renewable forms of energy like solar and wind, so true green hydrogen is technically a zero carbon emission fuel. However, green hydrogen makes up less than 1% of global hydrogen production, and it is incredibly inefficient for residential heating and cooking in our stoves and furnaces. Green hydrogen isn't all bad. It can be an incredibly useful tool in hard to electrify sectors like long haul shipping, but we do not need green hydrogen in our homes. Now, before I go on, I'm going to pause for a moment. I want to make sure that the different colors of hydrogen production are solid and understood. Does anyone have any questions regarding the different types of hydrogen production, gray, brown, blue, and green? You can raise your hand, throw it in the chat. Yes, then.
Yeah, could you clarify the difference between brown and gray hydrogen, since since coal is a fossil fuel, and then you said the gray is 99%. Does that mean that coal is also less than 1%?
Brown hydrogen, coal production of hydrogen certainly is less than methane. Coal is, depleting and on its way out in general as a fuel source. So yes, brown hydrogen does not make up a significant portion of hydrogen production. It's really gray hydrogen derived from methane. That is the primary form of hydrogen production.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Does anyone else have any other questions between gray, brown, blue, and green hydrogen? Great. Okay. Moving right along then, let's now then talk about, so that was all the context building. Now we know what hydrogen is and how it's produced. Let's now talk about the main portion of this webinar, which is hydrogen blending. First of all, what is it? Hydrogen blending is a practice being proposed by the oil and gas industry to blend hydrogen gas into the methane gas supply for cooking, space, and water heating for residential and commercial buildings, i.e., your home. The gas industry claims that this will reduce the overall amount of methane extracted, transported, and used overall, but this is certainly not the case. So why is this a bad practice? Hydrogen blending would negatively impact the climate, your wallet, and your health. And we're about to dive deep into each of those impacts right now. So first and foremost, the climate impacts. When discussing hydrogen's greenhouse gas emissions, it's important and necessary to talk about life cycle emissions. Life cycle emissions are the greenhouse gas emissions from each part of the fuel source supply chain: extraction, transportation, refinement, distribution, and end use. That they take into consideration much more than just the emissions that are caused by the combustion of the fuel for energy. When life cycle emissions are considered, fossil hydrogen actually contributes more greenhouse gas than methane to produce the same amount of heat. With life cycle emissions accounted for, gray hydrogen produces 30% higher emissions than methane for the same amount of energy, and blue hydrogen produces 20% greater emissions than burning methane or gas for heat. For blue hydrogen to be carbon neutral, methane leak rates would have to drop dramatically to less than 0.1% across the entirety of our methane gas infrastructure, and carbon capture rates would have to reach 90%. Fugitive methane emissions for leaks currently make up about 2 to 7.5% of total methane emissions, and carbon capture rates in practice are about 56%. So it is just not feasible to expect that blue hydrogen to be carbon neutral anytime soon. Moreover, both gray and blue hydrogen production also maintain our reliance on methane extraction, fracking, transport, distribution, and use. Methane is 80 times more potent than CO2 at trapping heat in our atmosphere in the first 20 years after its release. To mitigate the worst effects of climate change and to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius, we must end our reliance on methane gas, which means gray and blue hydrogen are out of the question. But what about green hydrogen? So yes, gray and blue are bad because they maintain reliance on fossil fuels, but what about green? So yes, green hydrogen is truly a zero emission fuel source since it's produced through a completely electrical process via renewable energy. However, it is totally inefficient to use green hydrogen in our homes for cooking and heating when there are electric options available for both cooking and heating that could run on renewable energy directly. Using renewable energy to produce green hydrogen simply to just combust it in our homes to fry an egg is not the best use of green hydrogen's time. Green hydrogen should be reserved for hard to electrify sectors like long distance transport, steel production, and electric grid balancing, which needs low emission fuel sources to replace the fossil and diesel fuels they rely on to make the green transition. On top of all of this, green hydrogen, again, only makes up less than 1% of all commercially available hydrogen worldwide. The pace of renewable energy installation will not meet the growing demands for electricity in vehicles, buildings, and other sectors, and the growing demand for green hydrogen in the industrial sector. Even if all green hydrogen projects currently planned were to come online by 2030, they are only estimated to reach 8 million metric tons of production. The current demand for hydrogen in industrial uses in the United States alone is estimated at 10 million metric tons. Green hydrogen certainly does have its place in the decarbonized, clean, and green future, but that place is not in our homes to fry an egg. Next, let's talk about how much this is going to cost, because the economic impacts of hydrogen blending are pretty significant. So it is expensive to produce hydrogen. The cost of producing gray hydrogen will always be higher than the cost of methane used to produce it. For blue hydrogen, the International Energy Agency estimates that adding carbon capture and sequestration to an SMR plant will increase costs by 50% in capital costs, an additional 10% for fuel costs, and a doubling of operational cost for CO2 transport and storage. For green hydrogen, its production cost is currently twice as high as gray hydrogen, so it is the most expensive option out of all of them to produce hydrogen. For us to reach net zero, the entirety of the gas system's infrastructure would need to be transitioned to accommodate high blends of green hydrogen or even 100% green hydrogen. No one is suggesting we transition to 100% hydrogen in our stoves or furnaces, but even at blends of 20 to 25% hydrogen, we would then need to replace infrastructure and appliances. We would have to replace miles of transition and distribution pipes, compressor, storage tanks, meters, and other components of the gas infrastructure system because hydrogen at high blends can damage these components originally made for just methane and increase fugitive leaks across the entirety of the methane gas system. All gas appliances would have to be replaced to be able to burn high hydrogen blends for these same reasons. These appliances were originally designed to burn methane alone, and the addition of hydrogen can cause damage to the appliance, which increases risks of leaks and explosions. With this more complex gas blend, also comes the need for more inspection and additional safety monitoring tools to ensure that the infrastructure isn't being damaged or leaking, and to ensure the safety of the workers manning these important infrastructure components. All of these costs for this massive overhaul of the gas system would be passed on to ratepayers and taxpayers, i.e. you and your family. The average American family is already struggling enough with the cost of living skyrocketing around the country, and we don't need to be saddled with even more expenses solely so the gas industry can exist and make a profit over the next few decades. Covering the economic impacts, next we go straight to hydrogen blending is bad for your health. As I've said many times during this presentation, blending fossil hydrogen into the methane gas supply locks in our reliance on methane gas use. Methane gas traps 80 times more heat in the atmosphere than CO2, and the extraction and transportation of methane leads to contaminated land, air, and water, and continued fugitive emissions through leaks in the seemingly endless miles of pipelines across the country. Extracting and using methane gas worsens climate change, which then impacts nearly every single component of human health. I'm not going to go through every single topic on this graphic, but this graphic from the CDC perfectly sums up how rising temperatures, more extreme weather, rising sea levels, and increased greenhouse gas levels affects our ability to breathe, eat, hydrate, regulate body temperature, and fight infections. Not included in this list, but absolutely just as important, is the mental health toll climate change has on folks most impacted by these effects. Climate change degrades both our physical and our mental health, and continuing to rely on methane gas will only make things worse. On a residential scale, combusting methane gas produces dangerous air pollutants like nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter. These air pollutants can lead to a wide variety of health impacts, particularly on children, such as leading to the development of childhood asthma, the worsening of current asthma and respiratory symptoms, and cardiovascular and neurological damage. To make matters worse, combusting methane hydrogen blends produces more nitrous oxide pollutants than combusting methane alone. Even when the gas appliance is not on, a recent study in California found that nearly every single one of the 159 gas stoves measured was leaking the cancer-causing gas benzene into residences at 7 times higher than the California Health Exposure Guide limits. So even when the methane appliance is off, it is leaking pollutants into your home, and when it is on combusting methane to fry an egg, it is also leaking pollutants into your home. The methane gas system in general is not healthy for our bodies, and hydrogen blending maintains our reliance on methane. Next, hydrogen blending not only affects our health physiologically, but it also increases household accident and injury risk. Hydrogen ignites more easily and is more explosive than methane alone. According to a study out of the UK, the number of explosions per year and the risk of injuries from in-home explosions would be 4 times higher with a 20% blend of hydrogen compared to methane alone. Blending gases together also increases the risk of flashback. A flashback is when the flame of a burner is extinguished due to the flame burning faster than the incoming gas, but gas continues to build up, essentially a massive gas leak. Flashbacks are dangerous because they can cause damage to the appliance and can even cause appliance shutdown. They can lead to gas leaks in enclosed areas, and methane is already leaking inside of residential and commercial buildings when gas appliances are on and off. And hydrogen makes these leaks even more dangerous. Because hydrogen and methane burn at different temperatures and rates, hydrogen blending increases the likelihood of flashbacks. Next, I want to talk about health in terms of environmental justice as well, because hydrogen blending is an environmental justice issue. Black, Indigenous, and people of color are exposed to more ambient air pollution than white folks and are more likely to suffer from air pollution related illnesses. Due to years of redlining and housing discrimination, people of color are more likely to rent homes with inadequate ventilation, resulting in higher levels of air pollution in the home. BIPOC neighborhoods tend to have less green space, less transit and more transit and industrial infrastructure, and less political and capital investment in city planning initiatives that would decrease ambient air pollution and increase health outcomes for residents. Hydrogen blending will only add to and compound these issues and disparate health outcomes as inadequate, older, and not properly adjusted gas infrastructure is used for gaseous hydrogen blends and subsequently leak pollutants into the homes and neighborhoods of typically Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Producing hydrogen from methane will cause more air pollution to be produced near environmental justice communities and cause more air pollution in the homes of folks who already deal with higher levels of ambient air pollution and may not have access to the proper equipment to ventilate the pollution out of their homes. The air pollution and risk caused by hydrogen blending will impact Black folks, Indigenous folks, and people of color more so than wealthier white folks. Next, in closing up our discussion of health impacts, I'd like to summarize with this recent resolution that was passed by the American Medical Association in June of 2022. The AMA passed a resolution recognizing the health, safety, and climate risks of current methods of producing fossil-fueled hydrogen and the dangers of adding hydrogen to natural gas. They resolved to advocate to appropriate government agencies such as the EPA and the DOE and federal legislative bodies regarding the health, safety, and climate risks of current methods of producing fossil fuel-derived hydrogen and the dangers of adding hydrogen to natural gas. If the American Medical Association, an organization known for being focused on the data, science, and experimental evidence of health issues, recognizes the dangers of hydrogen blending, this certainly is not a practice we should allow in our homes. So I just threw a lot of kind of depressing information at you. So to break it up before we get to the solutions of what you can do on a macro level and on a residential level, I'd like some more audience participation. So again, throw it in the chat or unmute yourself and give us an answer. Had any of these questions is fine to answer. Had anyone heard of hydrogen blending before this training? What do you think about burning hydrogen in your home? And has your local utility company proposed it as a pilot project or something that they are looking into?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Hello.
So you referred to, my name is Catherine and I live in Vancouver, Washington. You referred to high blends of hydrogen. So what percentage is considered high? And is the gas industry just starting to normalize the idea in their pilot proposals with lower percentages with the intent to increase the percentage while ignoring the problems of pipe damage and to keep getting customers and infrastructure in present time?
Sure. So to answer your first question, high blends are considered 20 to 25%.
Okay.
It is not feasible right now to do anything higher than 25%. The DOE and some energy companies are looking for massive turbines that could do 50%. But for right now, high blends are 20 to 25%. Low blends are like 5, less than 10. And as you increase the amount of hydrogen, you increase the amount of nitrous oxide that is being produced. You also increase the risk of flashbacks. But even if it's 5%, even if it's 2%, even if it's 10%, it's still blending and making the natural gas system even more dangerous than it is. So I can't, say what the thoughts of the oil and gas industry are, but I would certainly agree with you that a good strategy to make people think it's safe is to start low and then inch your way up to higher and higher concentrations.
Right. So it sounds like they could put it into their current infrastructure while kind of burying those risks. I mean, where I have Northwest Natural, they're talking about hydrogen. Their messages to me as a customer are that that's what they're investing in and it's coming. That's what, and of course it's to your home. I mean, they don't flat out say we're going to put it in the pipe and send it to your home, but they use that kind of general idea, and people are kind of buying into it. Oh wow, hydrogen! We could keep our gas stove or our furnace.
Exactly. It's the epitome of greenwashing, which is why we're trying to get out in front of the oil and gas messaging, which is, oh, look, cool, this new shiny thing that we're trying out, when really it's just a way for them to continue making a profit over the next couple decades. So I see some questions in the chat, and I also see a hand. Melanie.
Yeah, so this has to do with a couple of the questions in the chat. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and we've been following what Northwest Natural wants to do in Eugene, which is a pilot project to blend 5% hydrogen into their natural gas pipeline for a small proportion of their customers. It was withdrawn due to some community opposition, but we fear that it will probably come back. I'm particularly interested in a list of references for hydrogen increasing the nitrogen dioxide, in what's emitted, because I think that's an argument against being able to do this pilot project without having human subjects protections for the people in whose homes you are experimenting in this way. What I have found on that is that it's not clear, it's not really known, which to me would lead us to think that this is experimentation and would require extensive basically the federal regulation under human subjects protection. So I'm just interested in your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. There's about 31 references in this PowerPoint. Y'all will get the slides, and Melanie, I will happily email you directly the exact study where it's the nitrous oxide increase. And I absolutely agree. It's essentially experimentation on behalf of the oil and gas industry to see if they can do this, if it's going to damage their infrastructure. But certainly there needs to be some kind of protection for the human subjects of this experiment, which is simply being touted as a pilot project. But absolutely, I agree that it's less so a new, company-wide initiative and more so experimenting to see how bad it could get if something like this happens, or how bad it won't get and they could just squeak through the cracks. I see a couple other questions in the chat. I am going to pause right here and continue on to the solutions. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we'll wrap up the presentation with what you can do and some solutions that are available. And then it seems like we'll have a great Q&A session at the end of this training. So without further ado then, let me jump right back into the presentation. And let's talk about some alternatives. So we do not need to burn hydrogen in our homes to heat them because we have electric heat pumps. Heat pumps are more efficient than green hydrogen when comparing the two, using electricity from 100% renewables to power heat pumps versus burning 100% green hydrogen in a hydrogen-compatible boiler. Heat pumps are 5 to 6 times more efficient, which makes sense. Why would you take the renewable energy and use it to create something to burn to heat your home instead of using the renewable energy to then power something that could heat your home? Less steps, kind of useless to waste all this renewable energy to just take the green hydrogen and burn it in your home. And this is significant because space and water heating in buildings represents 1/6 of total energy demand in the United States today. It is much more efficient to use renewable energy to directly power electric heating and cooling appliances, as opposed to using renewable energy to create green hydrogen to then be burned in homes to generate heat. As for cooking, electric induction stoves are an excellent alternative to gas ranges. Replacing a gas stove with an electric induction stove reduces indoor air pollution, decarbonizes the kitchen, and again is a more efficient use of clean renewable energy than it is to produce green hydrogen to then burn in a gas stove. Both of these appliances have tax rebates written into the Inflation Reduction Act to incentivize customers to reduce their gas use and electrify their homes. So hydrogen blending is bad for our health, our wallets, and our climate, and there are electric alternatives. So what can be done to make sure that hydrogen isn't allowed in our homes? So here are PSR's policy recommendations when it comes to hydrogen blending. First, promote and expand the use of renewably generated electricity to heat buildings. Support options such as promoting energy efficient electric appliances like heat pumps through point of purchase rebates, emissions performance standards for buildings, all electric building codes, renewable requirements for electricity production, and expanded energy storage to enhance grid resilience, and performance. Next, as part of the process for considering permits for hydrogen projects, they should require comprehensive assessments and cost-effective analyses. Next, we should require accounting for the full life cycle greenhouse gas emissions of producing hydrogen. Greenhouse gas emission inventories must take into account all the emissions that are produced throughout the supply chain. Next, we should require certification of green hydrogen to assure that it is produced using truly renewable, 100% clean renewable energy sources. And lastly, state public utility commissions and state legislators should not allow gas utilities to raise ratepayer rates to purchase hydrogen for blending, nor should they allow hydrogen to qualify for clean heat credits. These recommendations will be easier to pass through some state legislators than others, and methane gas is a cornerstone industry in some states. But reducing the amount of fossil fuels we combust for energy to ideally zero is the crucial hurdle we must overcome for a safe, healthy, and stable climate. So these are big picture, what you take to your state representative, state senator, local council person. What can you do as an individual? Glad you asked. So for you personally to fight against putting hydrogen in our homes, first, oppose plans to blend hydrogen with methane for heating and cooking in buildings. If your utility is saying, hey, look, cool, shiny, we're going to do it, raise your voice, go to a city council meeting, become a politically active citizen and say, please no. Next, support the use of green hydrogen for hard to electrify industries. Again, like that green hydrogen hub that's coming just east of Portland in Oregon, that really should only be used for aluminum production, steel production, fertilizer production. You know, the hard to electrify sectors, you can't run a cargo plane on a Tesla lithium-ion battery, but a hydrogen fuel cell using green hydrogen could be a viable option. But green hydrogen should not be in our homes. Next, oppose the use of green hydrogen to justify maintaining or developing fossil fuel infrastructure. Just because we need more green hydrogen does not mean that we need more fracking wells, pipelines, or transportation infrastructure. Next, educate policymakers, colleagues, and the public about the unacceptable climate, health, and safety impacts of hydrogen combustion for heating and cooking, just like we're doing right now. Becoming an active participant in your local government is a great leverage point to make these facts heard by the people who have the power to prevent hydrogen from entering our homes. Join a city council meeting, town hall, or call your representatives and make your voice heard. Thank you so much for listening to me talk at you for the past 45 minutes. If this has lit a fire under you and you really want to get involved, I highly advocate you joining either Oregon PSR or PSR National. At PSR National, you could become a climate ambassador and work with us directly on clean energy and climate issues. And with that, let's open it up for questions. I will stop sharing my screen so I could look at you all. And thank you so much for listening. And now let's scroll through this chat. I saw a couple questions I didn't get to answer before. So first and foremost, What do we do with our gas stoves and fireplaces? Carolyn, Shelby, I hope that the end of this presentation gave you some possible solutions. Replacing it with an electrical appliance would be the best option. However, if you cannot replace it, if you rent, if it's not a financial feasibility right now, something you can do to simply reduce the amount of pollution that you are inhaling is ventilate, ventilate, ventilate. Open a window, use your exhaust hood, anything to get airflow going in your kitchen. If you truly cannot replace that gas stove, and installing a carbon monoxide monitor that goes off at a lower level instead of just fatal levels. If it goes off at a lower level, that is also an option to just keep track of the air quality in your kitchen. For the gas fireplace, that's hard. There's not, an electric fireplace, it doesn't have the same zhuzh of a gas fireplace, I do have to say, but it's the same exact pollutants. It's the same exact chemical that's being burned. It's methane being combusted for heat. I would say, again, ventilate, 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 which kind of defeats the purpose of trying to get warm if you open a window while you have your fireplace on. But an electric alternative would be great to a gas fireplace. Ruth, I didn't catch the flashback cause. So flashback happens when when the flame of a combustion is happening and the flame goes out, burns up faster than the incoming gas can then refuel it. Kind of like if you start a flame and then there's not enough tinder, or you didn't blow on it when you're trying to start a fire and it goes out because there's not enough fuel, all the fuel is used up. Because hydrogen and methane burn at different temperatures, high blends of methane tend to cause the flame to burn up very quickly. And then the flame is gone, but the gas is still coming out, which is why gas leaks can happen and damage to the appliance can happen. That's the cause of the flashbacks. Good to see you're fighting back in Oregon. Absolutely. Are there other air pollutants besides NOx that are increased by hydrogen blending versus methane/natural gas use? The only scientific studies I've seen are about NOx, and that makes sense because when you combust hydrogen alone, the only emittents are water and nitrous oxide. So I'm pretty sure only NOx is increased when you blend hydrogen. It's still early on in the research. We could see, maybe months or a couple of years from now, something else comes out about it. But right now, I've only seen studies about NOx. For instance, increasing methane and benzene leaks. That I can't tell you for sure from the data, pardon me, but definitely NOx is increased when you blend hydrogen. Can't electric induction stoves be dangerous to people with pacemakers? Thank you for bringing this up because, yes, it's a little bit of a nuanced issue, but the fact of the matter is an induction stove is creating a magnetic field, which is how the pot or the pan gets hot. And if you have an implanted medical device that uses electricity, such as a pacemaker or a diabetes pump, the magnetic field does have a chance of interacting with the electricity in the implant. And for example, the diabetes pump, it could affect the motor or it could affect the electricity in your pacemaker. However, you need to be incredibly close to the burner, to the induction burner, for the magnetic field to interact with it. I'm meaning like quite literally like leaning over the stove and being like having your heart 2 inches away from the burner being on. If you are standing up in front of your stove, it should not interact with your implanted medical device, but certainly magnetic fields, electromagnetic fields interact with electricity. So if you have an implant, there is a possibility for it to interact with it, but the possibility is very, very small. But thank you for asking that, but that's because that's incredibly true. All electric, great. If you have a solar system, do you need heat pumps? I would say if you have a solar, as in a solar energy capture system, I would say yes, you would still need a heat pump because the solar panels would extract and gain the energy to then power the heat pump. If you have another form of heating your home that works off of those solar panels, incredible. But the heat pump working in conjunction with the solar panel system on your home would be the most ideal climate resilient option for home heating. Great. Thank you, Barb, for dropping the source into the chat. Is relatively new. If I replace it, will it be sold to some low income person? Carolyn, for your question about if you replace the gas stove, will it be sold to someone else? That is entirely up to the retailer that is taking care of your selling and purchasing of a new appliance. Certainly, I cannot tell you for sure if there are programs around that will make sure that, you know, this brand new gas stove gets put in somewhere else. But that is probably entirely up to the retailer and the program that you use to sell and replace your gas stove. Alrighty. And does the word flashback imply explosion, not just leaks? Sure. So the term flashback is simply the name of what happens when the flame goes out and the gas is released, but it certainly does increase the likelihood of explosions because the gas is leaking out. All right. That, I think, are all the questions in the chat. Does anyone have any other additional questions right now off the cuff that you have? Going once. Going twice. Alrighty then, folks. In that case, I'll be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and learning a little bit about hydrogen blending. I hope you take this information and spread it wide and far and as far as you can. Oh, another question. Why not recommend just an electric stove? Electric stoves, electric cooking is wonderful. Electric induction cooking is kind of like the top tier, highest quality that is comparable to the kind of intense heat and quickness that you get with a gas stove. So induction is what we propose because it is a great replacement for gas when you're looking for the same kind of functionality. Electric stoves in general are, of course, a wonderful, wonderful option. You might not just get the same experience as, you know, if you had an induction stove. But again, certainly doesn't have to be induction. As long as it's electric, you do not have the gas connection in your home and kitchen. And just as Catherine just said, it is a lot less expensive. So if you're really looking to replace your gas appliance, an electric stove is wonderful. Alrighty. Any other questions, folks? Great. In that case, thank you all for joining today. Please take this information, spread it far and wide. Don't let hydrogen in our homes. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.